was a hypo, and I'm like, welcome to Under Two Capes. I'm Jared, and today we are discussing Heroes Reborn. In other words, what happens when Marvel literally becomes DC Comics. And what's up, Cameron? So the way I'm going to do this is I have the omnibus here, which is right here, and we're going to flip through it, which is why I brought out my little camera over here, because we are going to actually do this very, very interestingly. So the camera quality is going to drop a little bit because I have yet to configure this thing properly, but let's see if we can make this work. So again, Heroes Reborn was done by Jason Aaron, and it was part of his Avengers run, and basically it turned into what if, let me just turn the camera a little bit. What if what if Marvel became DC? So let's do this. All right. I'm just going to move my mouse over to the side. So I'll flip through this. And if you guys have any questions or anything that you guys would like me to talk about, just go ahead and drop it in there. But in the meantime, I'll talk basically about the story. So Heroes Reborn. So basically the way this works, it's pretty much an Elseworld story, well, kind of, where Agent Phil Coulson, yes, that Agent Phil Coulson, has allied with Mephisto, it was Mephisto all along, to rewrite reality so that the Avengers were never formed. Only, so here's the interesting part. You may be wondering, who are the heroes of the Earth? Well, it's the Squadron Supreme, a.k.a. Marvel's version of the Justice League. And the interesting thing about this storyline is it literally is what if Marvel became DC Comics, like severely. Like we got Nighthawk here, who is Marvel's Batman, fighting the Black Skull, who is like a mixture of Red Skull and Venom. Then we also have Dr. Spectrum, who is Green Lantern, and you also have the Blur, who is basically Marvel's Flash. And again, the way this works is that you're seeing all the Avengers, like Carol Danvers, Tony Stark, and we're in a world again where Captain America never came out of the ice and the Avengers never formed. So what we end up seeing, I'm just trying to get this centered in the camera. We also see Zarda, who is Marvel's Wonder Woman, very clearly inspired by Wonder Woman. And Blade is the only one that remembers like the way the world was supposed to be. So what happens is he essentially starts going around and recruiting the Avengers, like Thor, who's been a drunk because he was banished from Asgard. And then he teams, and then they fight. And then we see like the entire Squadron Supreme fighting their villains. And it's really interesting. And also with this, essentially their memories start to slowly come in. Like here's Hyperion flying straight through the head of Galactus. And I think Galactus in this was, well, it's also, here's the funny thing about this. This is pretty much what would happen if the Marvel heroes fought the DC heroes. Like Superman would just fly right through Galactus. Then we see like Hyperion. And the interesting thing about this is that a lot of the Squadron Supreme Heroes Reborn was set up in the series, what in a tie-in to the book called War of the Realms, because in there we saw the another Earth where the Justice League basically was taken over. We see the Hulk, and the Hulk, I think the Hulk also remembers, but then Hyperion kills him. And then we see Captain America. So the Thor and Blade got Captain America out of the ice. Then we meet the Blur, and he fights the Silver Witch, who is the mixture of is she Silver Witch? Yeah, so it's basically Wanda, but with Speed Force powers, and she can cast speed hexes, essentially speed spells, if you will. And we see the Ghost Rider, and so let me pick up here. It's like a lot of really cool stuff. We see this issue deals with a lot of galactic stuff. forget who's the art on this one, but this one has got some really dope, like really mature art on this. Like there's Mephisto, and they make a lot of references to seminal DC storylines in this, which makes they take a very meta way of looking at it. There's the Nightmobile. Apparently, Nighthawk found like Elektra, found the Winter Soldier's arm. He's a congressman on this Earth, so Batman's essentially a congressman. We also see like where he got the symbiote. You also see like the Green Goblin in this, and so as we continue, we the team is being like reassembled, if you will, and then we see Zarda, who is basically Marvel's Wonder Woman, and she essentially. So what we learn in this is that, as I said when Britt and I covered the Hyperion and Power Princess. What you see here is like Hyperion and Power Princess, aka Superman and Wonder Woman of Marvel, are together, and she's this version of Zarda is what the New 52 thought the Amazons were. That's essentially how I would qualify the Zarda and Power Princess. So as we continue, she fights like Hercules. She has a statue garden of all the guys she's turned to stone, and then she fights Thor. Basically, what's kind of interesting is like a lot of these early issues are the Squadron fighting the Avengers that they're basically the representatives of, like Thor's fighting Power Princess and such. And I love this because there's this great scene. It's making a reference to Wonder Woman being immortal at the time, and it's like Zarda leaves the island to like fight Vikings, and then she like hangs out. She fights in World War II and chops off Hitler's head, and then she has the whole God Butcher storyline where it's like three versions of her. One's more aggressive, one's old, one's much younger, and then we get like these. We get essentially Civil War where Hyperion and Nighthawk battle. Barry, if you guys have any questions about the storyline as I go through it, go ahead and drop them below. But it's because also apparently who's the character? Nighthawk got the symbiote essentially. Then they're talking about the Avengers because here's the interesting thing. What you discover is that these guys don't remember the Avengers because they were just pawns by Mephisto and Coulson. So these guys are in no way like, I mean, they're I wouldn't even say they're evil. They're pawns. I'll say that they're pawns. We also see when like Norman Osborn established the Dark Avengers, we have the Dark Squadron. The Hyperion, Power Princess, and Nighthawk are called the Big Three. So yeah, again, and we also have like One Moment in Time, One More Day. You see a lot of this, which I really love. This is what if Marvel was actually turned into the DC universe, and it drastically improved a lot of different like. A lot of different storyline moments. The main series wraps up really fast, and the Squadron are like, the memories are restored and the Earth is brought back to normal. But what I really like about this are the tie-in issues, because the tie-in issues have a lot more on the world building and story, such as we see Hyperion was a member of the Imperial Guard of the not the Kree, of the what's the alien race that the X-Men hang out a lot. Oh, the Shi'ar Empire. And he's just about to like retire. They're attacked by the Brood and then all turned into Brood people. So he has to kill them all. Then you have the Starjammers, which is basically, I guess, Guardians of the Galaxy. And then we see what's Peter Parker. Peter Parker in many ways is the what's the word? He's the Jimmy Olsen of this Earth. He's like an idyllic kid. He has both Uncle Ben and Aunt May, and he wants to essentially get like a tech scholarship. So at Empire University, he makes these drones, and what happens is his mother Aunt May is like killed in not really in a bombing, but in in the what's the word? The collateral damage of a superhero fight, and then he sells the pictures to the Daily Bugle, and then he works for the Daily Bugle and like hangs out, and we see like he becomes Hyperion's photographer, as we see in like regular DC right there. I love that image right there. And then the office is attacked by these robots, by these bug creatures, and then he gets turned into Shutterbug, which is essentially like Spider-Man. Then we have Magneto and the Mutant Force, which involves like all the mutant characters like Emma Frost and Magneto, obviously, and a lot more of the other, like a lot of those other characters. We have the Young Squadron, who are essentially like, obviously, the sidekicks in the Young Avengers. Dave says, Mark Gruenwald's Squadron Supreme will always be Marvel's best Justice League. Predated Watchmen with similar themes and a better story. Yeah, I agree with you on that. It is basically Watchmen before Watchmen, only it's a little, honestly, it's a little more reverent than Watchmen, honestly, in terms of like treating the superheroes. But yeah, that's definitely it. So with this, we have the Young Avengers, which we're getting like the origins of all of them. Like essentially like Sam becomes basically Kid Green Lantern, but he becomes Kid Spectrum, and as you guys know, he is I forget the name of his group. It's basically the he becomes Nova, and then we have Kamala Khan, who like helps Power Princess to stop an artifact robbery, so she becomes basically Donna Troy. She becomes Girl Power, which I gotta be honest, that's the lamest name for like a Donna Troy analog. Girl Power, really? And then we see Miles Morales becomes basically Robin. You can think of him as did they ever give his name? I don't know. I'm trying to find the. I think he's just Falcon. Oh yeah, he's Falcon essentially. And then the young, it's essentially the Young Squadron. They fight, and then they discover Deadpool, who is basically they combine Deadpool with Harley Quinn in this, as in the case of the Hammer right there. And then they fight, and then Deadpool basically tells them about how the Squadron aren't exactly the most moral people, and they're actually like, when you think about it, it's like they lord it over the world that like they're not heroes, they're like evil people, if you will. Then we have Siege Society, which is about like essentially the society of supervillains. Like you have a Soviet agent, which is essentially a U.S. agent, but for the Soviet Union, Black Widow, Sabretooth, Hawkeye, which works because the cool thing about this is Hawkeye was a supervillain back in the day when before he became an Avenger. So they fight. We also see Tom Thumb, who was the tech guy of the original Squadron Supreme. So that's kind of a really cool like reference they have there. And so really a lot of this is like if you're a DC fan, but if you ever wanted Marvel to turn into DC, this is basically the book for you. That's basically what this turns into real fast. Which it never ceases to really like. I'm just making sure the video is caught up. Okay, good. So then we get the next one, which is basically the Queen's Sacrifice. Now this is essentially the Thunderbolts. Interesting how that turns out. But they're literally the Suicide Squad. We see Frank Castle. He's in Westchester, New York, and he's recruited by Elektra because they need a mission. But in this, when the Suicide Squad accomplishes their objective, their minds are wiped. So, the Amanda Waller of this universe is, interestingly enough, Wilson Fisk. And then here in the Nighthawk and Falcon issue, which is essentially, Batman and Robin, it recounts what eventually turns into. Oh, hey, NJ. Yeah, Zarda is literally. They never really indicate if it's like Clay or like she's the daughter of a god. But as far as I know, the way the origin goes, she literally comes from an island of only warrior women. And she has that component of Wonder Woman, which is actually really cool. I really like how they do that. And then essentially he's fighting like his version of the Joker, which of course would be the Green Goblin. And then it turns into essentially the death of Gwen Stacy, but for like essentially the death of Jason Todd, as you see here with this page right here. It's basically that. And then what we have, yeah, exactly, Cameron. A lot of the characters and their like analogies are actually really well chosen. This event, they actually put a ton of thought into this, more than I honestly expected them to. And then as we see here in the death of the dynamic double, we see essentially the this is a good one. This guy, oh wait, I think that was the previous one. Okay, so this one, A Pale Reflection, is the this is a, hey, what's up, Tevia? And what's up, Jose? So this storyline is basically, what if Luke Cage was Commissioner Gordon, and that's who he is. My day's going fine, Tevia. So he's basically Commissioner Gordon solving a crime. And again, it's like they pick the characters and their analogies that both you wouldn't expect, but make sense, if you will, because it's like, yeah, I could see like Luke Cage being like the grizzled cop Commissioner Gordon character. That actually works out really well. Then we get my personal favorite, ironically, because it's written by Vita Ayala. This is Night Gwen, which is, and from the issue Hunters and Prey. So with this, we open up on so someone's killed by someone's killed by this weird jackal-looking creature. I wonder who that's going to be. And we open on Ravencroft Asylum, which they took Ravencroft Institute and Arkham Asylum and combined them. And we open on Dr. Gwen Stacy. So in this universe, Gwen Stacy herself never died, but she was like it's not necessarily Spider-Gwen, Tavia, but it's like Gwen Stacy, because there is no other Gwen in this. But she basically became Night Gwen, who is well, actually, the character's name is Nightbird, and she is, yeah, Tavia's right. She is basically the Batgirl of this universe. She even has her own little like watchtower, if you will. I'll hold this up to the camera a little bit more. And she essentially, like, she's trying to solve this crime. So she goes throughout like the city trying to solve this. And then it turns out she knows who did this. It's the Jackal, Dr. Miles Warren. So she goes to confront the Jackal, but it's not Miles Warren. It's Flash Thompson. Yes, that's right. Flash Thompson, otherwise known as Agent Venom in the main universe, became the Jackal after he killed Miles Warren, because Miles was like really like obsessed with her. So obviously Flash killed him. And then what you get, yeah, I can see Luke Cage becoming a commissioner being adapted into an Netflix. Yeah, that would be actually really cool. So then she essentially like drops off Flash and then falls out. And then we get the Weapon X or Alpha Flight. And this is kind of the Death of Superman issue where like Hyperion is killed by Wolverine because he has enchanted claws. And the Alpha Flight basically falls back and like is in hiding, expecting revenge. Now you may be wondering, Jared, how could someone possibly take like actual revenge against Wolverine? Because it's like anything they try and do to him, Wolverine is going to heal. So that's when it gets really, really brutal. So the Squadron attack and take out Alpha Flight. But so what Dr. Spectrum / Green Lantern does is he takes Wolverine and flies him onto the moon. Does Luke Cage have his powers? No, I don't think he does. I think he's a regular dude. So they take So he takes Wolverine, drops him on the moon, and then just leaves him there. So even if he regenerates, he's still going to be suffocating. And even if he like somehow survives that, where's he going to go? Then you have like all the variant covers and such, which as you can see, it's like a lot of like of this was meant to evoke like, because the Squadron Supreme kind of exists so that Marvel can do Marvel DC crossovers, but without like consulting DC. But there's one cover that I want to show. It's this one by Artgerm. Like, look at that. That is Wonder Woman right there. That is Wonder Woman right there. So I'm going to change cameras back since we're done with the book. But yeah, so that's Heroes Reborn. And it's one of those storylines where, okay, there you go. It's one of those storylines where it's one of the most unique things that Marvel, it's called Heroes Reborn. I'll hold it up against the screen, Louise. It's right there. I have the omnibus, which includes not just like the main series, but it also has like the tie-ins, because the tie-ins is where you get all those extra stories like Luke Cage and Night Gwen and such. I'm gonna move my camera over. But yeah, so ask me any questions you have about Squadron, about Heroes Reborn. It's a really fascinating concept that Marvel did. And again, it's one of those stories where when I was checking it out, it was one of those things where this is, by the way, the only like part of Jason Aaron's Avengers run that I've actually read, because this is like, because I didn't enjoy a lot of what Jason, by the art style of the main book is by Ed McGuinness. He drew a lot of Hulk, but the one for that cover is Artgerm Lau. So the thing about this, so the part that really got me is just because I'm a big fan of the Squadron Supreme. I think they're a fascinating concept. And in many ways, this is like in keeping with like a lot of, this came out, I believe in 2018. 2021 is when the series came out. So 2021. Now, the thing about this that's really interesting is, so this also is the second Marvel book to have the name Heroes Reborn. The first one was in the 90s, and that's where you get like a lot of the Image guys at the time showing up. And Squadron Supreme felt more like the Injustice Syndicate. Yeah, but QT, here's the difference. As opposed to like the heroes actually turning evil, the heroes in the Squadron Supreme book by Elise Grunwald were like misguided. They weren't straight up evil. They just relatively were like, they were going about things for the right reasons. By the way, I'm gonna get the other Squadron Supreme on the bus. So this is what we're talking about. So this is Mark Grunwald's Squadron Supreme. We had a nice cover from Alex Ross. And this was the one where the Squadron Supreme institute, it's called the Utopia Protocol, where they essentially take over the world, but non-violently, and say, hey, we're going to create this planet, we're going to turn this planet into a legit utopia. But they basically turns into Injustice, basically, but they're not like evil. That's the difference. That's why I tolerate this as opposed to Injustice. Even this, because in this, they're not really evil. They're just pawns, as I said before. And then Tabby says, question, speak of the new Heroes Reborn. Okay. How do you feel about Agent Coulson as a secondary villain? First off, I think he was more of a primary villain, so there is that. But as for like Coulson, that was the biggest shock, because Coulson was like put an emphasis on there because of the MCU. And the funny thing about it is like it was a bit of a shock, because I'm not used to him being evil and stuff. Just thinking Squadron Supreme crossover would be dope. Wish I had it done instead of Wonder Woman and Cap. Would love. Well, you can see that in my Squadron Supreme comparison I did with Brit, because we did Superman and Wonder Woman compared to Hyperion and Zarda. It was really fun with that. Hey, what's up, Sean? So yeah. So in terms of this series, honestly. Yeah, and so going back to the original Squadron, the original Heroes Reborn, what the original was essentially leading to is like the reboot of Marvel. And this is where you got like Jim Lee drawing like the Fantastic Four, Rob Liefeld on Captain America. Yeah, this is where you got that infamous Rob Liefeld Captain America, where his chest is like out to here and his head is like back on his chest. Like, it's one of the most infamous images in comics. But it did so badly that they were like, yeah, let's not reboot. And that's just something that's very interesting to consider. Comparatively, Marvel has never done an actual in continuity DC style reboot. They've done like soft reboots like Secret Wars, where they like try and fold in a few things and retcon stuff, but they've never gone pretend like we've never published a book ever. But DC obviously has done that many, 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 many times. But it's so honestly, of the two, I prefer this one because the concept is much more clear in this. And this is more like, because from what I read online, this is an actual like Elseworlds. It's just what happened is that Mephisto and Coulson merged the two worlds together. So this still exists as like a separate universe, which is why I love having this, because I get to read it anytime I want. What if Marvel became the DC universe? And that's honestly this. And honestly, it gets pretty cool. I really like it. And honestly, if they ever wanted to make like a game or a movie, but the Squadron Supreme, that would be cool. See, that's the way you reboot it. Louise felt I always felt weirded out how Marvel does this reboot. Well, yeah, because Marvel always does what's called the sliding time scale. In other words, as time progresses, take the Punisher. He at first he was a non-vet, then he's a Gulf War, then he's an Iraqi freedom veteran. So they do that because Marvel doesn't want to lose all that continuity. Although I think Spider-Man could kind of use a reboot. Tavia says, I'm so curious with the new Heroes Reborn story. Was there any fallout from this story? Well, in terms of like what happened later, the Squadron Supreme was still like stuck in the 616 universe. So they're still there. I don't think Marvel's done anything or that much with them. I think they've done like some stories. I have to look that up. But as for like Mephisto, I'm not sure. They should probably, or Coulson. Personally, I'm not sure. They probably did. But in terms of like a good MCU movie, this would actually be interesting. Cast like all the DCEU actors, and then make it so that this is the reboot. The world reboots and the Squadron took over. That's actually really cool. Is DC relaunching their titles in September? Hopefully, no Tom King, or then. By then, or even much more sooner. I think they are. Some titles I've heard are. I could be wrong, but some titles people close to me have said that like some of the titles are gonna go. It's not sure about the Tom King Wonder Woman. Let me put it this way, NJ. Latest King leaves the book is early to mid next year. That's the earliest. That's the latest. As for earliest, probably end of this year, I would say. Depends on how many issues he has written, and it's in the can. Dave says Marvel does a sliding time scale, and DC does retcon events. Like, yeah, exactly. Where they need to update. Yeah, and arguably, here's the thing. I would argue DC does the best because, to a certain degree, you do have to reboot eventually because. The thing about it is eventually the continuity gets a little too like convoluted, and regular people aren't gonna take the time to like look up wikis and such. Obviously I do because I do the channel and stuff. So and now I think about it, the only time Marvel reboot for Thanos, although it's different for different reasons. Well, yeah, you could say that. Arguably for worse reasons, but yeah, you could definitely say that. But yeah. Actually, let's talk about that. That wasn't exactly a reboot because what that was, I mean, it kind of was a reboot, but it kind of wasn't, because the thing about the thing about All New, All Different is that with that, they wanted to replace all of the characters. They wanted to turn everyone into a mantle, which That's not the way that this works. Arguably, no one should be a mantle. Like, mantle swap should not be a thing, and certainly not mantle sharing. I'm against there being two of any superhero. I'm just going to say it. Except for Green Lantern, but that's just because that's baked into the, like, core identity of the character, where it's like there's like a core of people. It's an army, essentially. But when it came to All New, All Different, they were like, we could put anyone with the identity and they'll still buy it because they're buying Spider-Man, they're buying Captain America. It doesn't matter. They're buying Thor. The problem that Marvel ran into is that this was around the time the MCU was in its heyday. So you'd have people that go to like a comic book store and go, okay, so I just saw a new Thor movie. Bring me a Thor. I want to read the latest Thor comic. Who's this girl? That I've heard that many times happen, and that caused people to walk away because it's like, just show me Iron Man. Anyway, speaking of this Squadron Supreme, I'm wondering, who's your favorite member of the Squadron? It's gotta be Hyperion and Power Princess. Surprising no one, but is that because I like how like Hyperion's actually interesting because instead of being a reporter, he's an American history teacher. So they kind of take that element of truth, justice, American way and turn it into that. Whereas Power Princess is not an ambassador. She is straight up like the more hardcore Wonder Woman, but she's still like, for lack of a better term, good, I guess. Technically, I think the last time they reboot was during the 90s with the original Heroes Reborn. Yes, as I said, but yeah. But it was only like a few of them. But I believe like the intention was eventually to reboot. But I'm like, obviously that didn't work. Yeah, I prefer DC's way. Yeah, because here's the thing about DC. Say what you want about constantly throwing out continuity. But with Flashpoint, as long as you're committed to it, because that's the problem with Flashpoint when they rebooted. They like Batman and Green Lantern's lore stayed. But I'm like, you're telling me Blackest Night still happened when a lot of the characters that were like key to Blackest Night haven't been introduced in this universe? What are you doing? Or like Batman's gone through his entire bad history in 5 years. Are you stupid? So if they actually do a reboot and say none of the continuity carries over, great. Then they could do that. Dave says legacy titles work for some DC characters, but it's never worked for Marvel. Yeah, exactly. And even with like DC, again, it's like Marvel. See, here's the problem. Here's why Miles Morales worked in the Ultimate Universe, because there was no other Peter Parker for him to compete with. The whole concept of sharing mantles is the biggest lazy move you can make right now, because it's like, yeah, we're not going to put in the time to develop these characters and give them their own identities. And Dan Slott has admitted that like when you do like a race or gender swapping, he thinks that people are less likely to reject it, even though arguably the opposite is true. So it's really stupid. Marvel really struggles. This is the thing. DC was the company that invented the sidekick. Let's not forget about that. So like legacy was like built into their DNA. Marvel, I hate to say it, but maybe they shouldn't do legacy characters for their... Yeah, exactly. If I owned Marvel, what I would instantly do is all of those characters, like, let's say, all those characters like Miles and stuff and Sam, give them their own identities. That's it. We're done sharing mantles. That's not happening. Whereas if you go to like, whereas it's the same thing with DC. Like we shouldn't have two Superman, two Aquaman, two Batman, if you will. No, we're done with that. That was arguably a stupid idea. We're not continuing that. We're going to clean the house. And that's really, really it, because it's like, that's the way you got to do it. Because again, as I always say on this show, when people think of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, they think of Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent, and Diana Prince, respectively. That's it. Hot take. I don't like that they made Miles being Peter 2.0 with some same. That's true, because it's like he doesn't even have his own unique villains. You want him, you think that this is some shortcut to him being iconic. He only got iconic because of that movie. Let's not forget about that. That's the really interesting part. Marvel forgot, you give them a good movie, they will become a household name, if you will. Like, the only character I can think of that maybe work with Kamala Khan is Marvel. No, it didn't, because it's like, well, the reason why I don't think it worked for like Kamala Khan is because Carol Danvers was a better Ms. Marvel than she was Captain Marvel. In fact, that was the other thing I would change if I were in charge. I would put Carol back as as Ms. Marvel, and then just don't have a Captain Marvel, or essentially what you could do is switch them and put Carol Danvers back as Ms. Marvel, because that was like her peak as a character. Because when you read I always tell people, read the Brian Reed run of Ms. Marvel. I'll get it real quick. Oh, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Zarda cheat on appearing by banging the Hulk? Nope, that was she. No, that never happened. That never happened. No. As far as I know, that never happened. So when I say you want to look for a great female character, hang on, my action figures are playing stuck together. Hang on. Pick up this run. Brian Reed's Ms. Marvel run. It's the Ms. Marvel years for Carol Danvers. Or, so as NJ knows, because Absolute Wonder Woman was doing so well and I loved it, I wanted to check out Kelly Thompson's other work. So I got the omnibus for her Captain Marvel run, and it's really good. It is really, really, really good. By post Flashpoint Blackest Night will look very different. They should have released one-shots that recapped events for the new 52 universe, showing what they look like in continuity. That would be one thing, Dave. That would be one thing. At least give me something. Jeez. Now, that would definitely... It would still be a Band-Aid on the overall problem, but it would still be something. Maybe, NJ says, maybe that was the Ultimate Universe. In that case, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it was probably that. I do know that the Absolute Power Universe, which is essentially the Ultimate Squadron Supreme, they were very different characters. Like, Zarda is straight up evil in that. So it wouldn't surprise me. But so what else you guys got? But yeah, so that's kind of where that goes. And honestly, for the Squadron Supreme as a concept, in many ways, DC kind of Marvel kind of does the whole Justice League better than DC, and that's like really, 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 really interesting. But what other questions do you guys have about Squad Supreme, DC, whatever you guys would like to hear? And so let's see. So yeah, true. It's the old Ultimate Universe with Supreme Power written by JMS. Yes, exactly. I have like the first trade, which is like showing how the Squadron Supreme formed. It is vastly different, like vastly different. But it's still cool. It's not like it's anything really bad. It's not anything that like I don't enjoy. As long as that's not like the general rule and that's the exception to the rule, then I'm fine. And it very much is the exception to the rule. DC don't use Justice League to its true potential. A few good runs here and there, but generally they don't do a good job. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, the Wade run I enjoy for the most part, but it could be so much better. Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison, and Dwayne McDuffie / Brad Meltzer are the best ones in my opinion. if Marvel brought them back and you're in charge, how would you write them? Basically, like the Justice League. I would do all the creative decisions that DC is too afraid to do with the Squadron, just to say, your move, DC. I have all the DC fans coming to my side. I would even do, it's gonna be Earth 712. Just make it its own separate line, and then basically do, this is Marvel's DC universe, and look, we're gonna run your universe way better than you do. And then what I would also do is then cross over to Marvel and run their universe way better. Oh, also, ironically, guess who's not in the Squadron Supreme? Any analog for Lois Lane. Isn't it funny how the best versions of the Justice League don't have her? Speaking of writers, it's really fun to me that whenever people suggest a specific gender or race writer into a character, it doesn't always turn out. Yeah, Britt and I have talked about that, because there's a thing in the Wonder Woman fandom that only women should write Wonder Woman, and then they forget that when you have to like when you have to like do like when you have to like essentially like what was the thing? Yeah, it's like there are plenty of female writers that haven't gotten Wonder Woman that like butchered her, like Gail Simone. Or it's like the Wonder Woman editor is a woman and she doesn't do anything with to check Tom King. So so that's where I'm like, okay, guys, come on. You really think that this would be better? Because I don't think so. If anything, it would be relative. It wouldn't have any like relative effect. Now, should the writer, if they're not a member of that community, consult with members of that community to make it authentic if they're going for that? Yeah, I think so too. Wonder Woman is totally useless in Wade's current run. She barely even talks. Yeah. What other Heroes Reborn cards besides Abuse 6 do you like or find interesting? As I brought up, Heroes Reborn by Jason Aaron is the best one in my opinion. Well, it's the one that I've read. Let me put it to that way. Because it's like with this, again, Timo, it's basically Marvel's version of the DC universe. That's what this Earth is. And it involves like the Justice League, essentially. And they do a lot of really cool stuff in there. Which is, yeah, exactly. The editors don't exactly do their jobs, particularly like Tom King. So I'm like, if you guys do realize that Tom King's boss is a woman right now, right? And she arguably is not the right one. Like, for example, Black Panther fans say the best right from it is Christopher Priest, not the reason on the whites. Yeah, exactly. But the interesting thing about that is like even Christopher Priest has talked about that he doesn't like it because I think he said he left Marvel because essentially they started turning him into they started basically saying that he can't handle any other characters other than like black characters because of his race. And I go, guys, that is legit racist. So no, that doesn't work. That really that's not the way that's gonna work. No. Yeah, it is messed up, Tevye. It's really annoying because it's like, I'm like, come on, guys. Because media treats people like they're monoliths. Like whenever they have a character that's like bi or gay, they are only in like they treat them like they're all like the stereotypical version of that community, and that's stupid. Do you like Aaron's Avengers? I think they're the worst Avengers of the century. Yeah, I don't like them. I like this storyline in there, but I don't like his Avengers run. I really don't. Fantastic policy, Marvel. Totally not racist. I know, right? It's definitely not racist. Are there any Native American heroes in DC and Marvel? Yes, there are. Let me pull that up real quick. There is So for Native American superheroes, and this is counting like all the different like characters. There was Dawnstar, Man of Bats, a Manitow Raven. Who's Manitow Raven? Simply Raven. She okay. So it's not the Raven. It's a different Raven. Apache Chief, Iraq, Moonstar, Warpath, Forge, Black Condor. It's a lot of them. The MCU has the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever and make a squad. Yeah, that is what I keep saying, Dave. If they were to do that and announce that with the original cast and Zach directing, that would be the biggest troll on Marvel like ever. And Marvel would actually get my respect if they did that. Like, oh my God, can you imagine if they did that? That would be the funniest thing ever. They would forever be known as they're the ones that trolled DC. That would be so dope. What else do you guys have? And then we'll start wrapping up for the day. And then obviously tomorrow is Comics League Dark. We're going to be talking about a lot of other cool stuff. Speaking of racist stuff, that's something I never thought I'd hear on the show. I was so baffled by the decision to make Echo's power with Native American spiritual stuff. Yeah, I'm like, what are you doing? And also, why would you make an Echo show, period? She's a side character in a show. You can't, not every character needs a Disney Plus show, Marvel. Like, no, I'm not gonna do that. No. That is like one of the stupidest things ever. Well, let me see. Echo's superpowers. I'm trying to find what her comic powers are. I think it's like that she can copy the fighting style. Okay. She has photographic reflex. So I think that means is that if she sees you doing something like she's essentially Taskmaster. So that's kind of cool. They could have done that. About the new Fantastic Four trailer and Marvel is going to promote Ben's storyline where he has his creepy time or crush phase. No, that's what I call deconstruction. Yeah, I'm like that is I'm very concerned for this movie. In addition to the fact, the other problem with it, the other problem with it is like when you look at that movie, the problem that Marvel's going to run into with Fantastic Four is that they haven't marketed it that much. So what are you doing? It's like because in many ways, Fantastic Four is to Marvel what Superman is to DC. This movie needs to succeed for Marvel for the MCU. Like if this like falls apart, that's gonna be like a big F you to Marvel, particularly if DC outgrosses Marvel, because that's when it's like you might as well the whole like the war is over, boys. The war is over. Hot take. I hate that the most powerful thing in DC is the writer from Grant Morrison. Like I get it, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean there should be some like commonalities, like in terms of consistency. But I get what he's saying, because like Stan Lee said the same thing, that like who would win a fight? Whoever the writer wants to win. But still, I'm like, okay. Let me see. If Fantastic Four is going to flop, it could still go either way for Superman, but the writing's on the wall for Fantastic Four. Yeah, also, I think they're oversaturating Pedro Pascal, and I don't think that's going to work out for Marvel. I don't think he's a box office draw anymore, so I don't know. Let me put this way. I hope Marvel can do well, but the problem that they're also forgetting is that the Fantastic Four aren't the big like characters that they think they are. Because here's the problem with it. Because not only was the last movie like years ago, but also it's like every Fantastic Four movie that's come out has been met with lukewarm like reception at best, and overwhelmingly negative reviews at worst. And that to the point where the IP gets that reputation. And I'm sorry, that's not how you create an IP that actually has staying power. Like, I'm sorry, that's a huge problem there. But anyway, so I think that is a good place. I really hope Absolute Wonder Woman finishes top 10 of the month, because I know because I know weekly sales are finished one or two, it deserves to be in the top 10. Yeah, I'm hoping. The problem with that is that so far it's only coming out the past 2 months. It's come out the end of the month, and that doesn't help for monthly comic sales. But I'm hoping they start to move it back into the middle of the month, so that it can get to that point. Well, as far as I know, it could get to the point where like even if they put it at the end of the month, it's still performing well. So really, we have no idea in that sense. What do you think of Kevin Feige so far, overall Marvel Entertainment CEO? I think that Endgame has shown that he doesn't know. That post Endgame shows that he doesn't know what he's doing, and like by pushing the like obscure characters that no one's probably going to go see. That's the problem, and that's part. Like there never should have been a Shang-Chi movie. I'm sorry, there never should have been a Shang-Chi movie. Like absolutely not. The character's I would say C or D-list character at best. It's very funny that Marvel decided to make its own 0 hour in the form of Heroes Reborn, and Marvel didn't care that DC's Global was a failure. Yeah. So it was Absolute Wonder Woman saved. DC won't look at it and say, well, it's still safe because they know that if it drops in the charts, I mean, it still got like in the top 20 for where it launched, and that in and of itself is good. So when you get to for like the positions it's in. So even on that, let me put it this way. All it has to do is continue to sell dramatically more than Tom King's Wonder Woman like it is, and you're good to go. That's it. Maybe it was just me, but maybe Kevin Feige should focus on main characters, not side characters. Yeah, that's the thing. Some call the problems with Fantastic Four movies over the decades the Jack Kirby curse stemming from his poor treatment at Marvel. I wouldn't be surprised if that's like a major reason why that it like why these movies keep blowing up, because it just doesn't work like that. So let's see. I never saw a currency having many fans. Like what? Yeah, but the problem is it's like his the actual fans he has are starting to like falter as more and more of his Flophouse movies start to come in. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if after this if like after like Doomsday and stuff, he leaves, like he's done. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if at that point he isn't like removed or replaced. That's what I'm going to tell you there right there. But I think it's a good place to leave it. So I hope you guys enjoyed Heroes Reborn. We will see you guys later for I'll see you guys tomorrow night at like 9 p.m. for Comics League Dark, where we talk about all the different comic news of the month. And then Super Wonder Legacy, Brent and I are going to be going live at 9 p.m. with Jid to talk about our DC timeline. In other words, we did our own history of the DC universe. And then movie night, we're going to be talking about superhero movie. And then let's see, what else? What else do we have here? In terms of like, obviously, I'm going to be doing the Wonder Woman Q&A, Amazon Answers on Sunday at about 3:30 p.m., where I'm going to answer you guys' questions about the Perez run of Wonder Woman, why it's so awesome and such. And yeah, so that's what I got right now. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, consider becoming a member, and stay heroic, everyone. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lane. She belongs to General Zod, Zois, and Max About for life. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.